Queen Mother Yasenqa was the Queen Mother of the Edweso tribe of the Ashanti in what is modern Ghana. She was an exceptionally brave fighter who in March 1900, raised and led an army of thousands against the British colonial forces in Ghana and their efforts to subjugate the Ashanti and seize the Golden Stool, the Ashanti nation's spiritual symbol of unity and sovereignty. Yasenqa mobilized the Ashanti troops and for 3 months sieged the British fort of Kumasi. The British colonizers had to bring in several thousand troops and artillery to break the siege, exiling Queen Yasenqa and 15 of her closest advisors to the Seychelles. She lived in exile until her death in October 1921. Yasenqa's war, as it is presently known in Ghana, was one of the last major wars on the continent of Africa to be led by a woman. The Dhomi Amazons was an all-female military regiment of the Fon people of the Kingdom of Dhomi, in the present-day Republic of Benin. They existed from the 17th century to the end of the 19th century. While European narratives refer to the, similar to the semi-mythical Amazons of ancient Anatolia, they called themselves Ahosi, king's wives, or Minnow, our mothers, in the Fon language. The Ahosi were extremely well-trained, and inculcated with a very aggressive attitude. They were ferocious fighters with a reputation for decapitating soldiers in the middle of battle, as well as those who were unfortunate to become their captives. Sedonghombe was one of the great leaders of the Minnow. In 1851 she led an army of 6,000 women against the Egba fortress of Abeokuta. Because the Minnow were armed with spears, bows and swords, while the Egba had European cannons, only about 1,200 survived the extended battle. European encroachment into West Africa gained pace during the latter half of the 19th century. In 1890, King Nzinga used his Minnow fighters alongside the male soldiers to battle the French forces during the First Franco-Dahomey War. The French army lost several battles to them because of the female warriors' skill in battle. Queen Nanny, a Jamaican national hero, was a well-known leader of the Jamaican Maroons in the 18th century. Nanny was kidnapped from Ghana, West Africa, as a child, and was forced into slavery in Jamaica. Growing up, she was influenced by the Maroons and other leaders of the enslaved Africans. The Maroon people were enslaved blacks who fled the oppressive plantations and formed their own communities in Jamaica's interior. Nanny and her brothers ran away from the plantation and hid in the Blue Mountains area. From there, they led several revolts across Jamaica. Queen Nanny was a well-respected, intelligent spiritual leader who was instrumental in organizing the plans to free enslaved Africans. For over 30 years she freed more than 800 slaves and helped them settle into Maroon communities. She defeated the British in many battles and despite repeated attacks from the British soldiers, Grandee Nanny's settlement, called Nanny Town, remained under Maroon control for several years. Harriet Tubman, born Araminta Harriet Ross, 1820–March 10, 1913. Harriet Tubman was an African-American abolitionist, humanitarian, and Union spy during the American Civil War. Born into slavery, Tubman escaped to Philadelphia in 1849, then immediately returned to Maryland to rescue her family, slaves, with the help of the network of anti-slavery activists and safe houses known as the Underground Railroad. She later helped recruit men for John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry October 16 to 18, 1859, to free enslaved blacks. In June 1863, Tubman became the first woman to lead an armed expedition in the Civil War. She guided the Combahee River Raid, which liberated more than 700 enslaved blacks in South Carolina, the largest liberation of enslaved black people in American history. Carlo Tukumi was kidnapped from her Yoruba tribe, brought in chains to Cuba as a child and forced into slavery in the city of Matanzas, working to harvest and process sugar cane under the most brutal of conditions. She was bright, musical, determined and clever. In 1843, she and another enslaved woman named Fermina led an organized rebellion at the Triumvirato sugar plantation. Fermina was locked up after her plans for the rebellion were discovered. Using talking drums to secretly communicate, Carlota and her fellow warriors freed Fermina and dozens of others, and went on to wage a well-organized armed uprising against at least 5 brutal slave plantation operations in the area. Carlota's brave battle went on for 1 year before she was captured, tortured and executed by Spanish. Queen Nzinga was a highly intelligent and powerful 17th-century ruler of the Ndongo and Matamba kingdoms, modern-day Angola. Around the turn of the 17th century, Nzinga feared and cleverly fought for the freedom of her kingdoms against the Portuguese, who were colonizing the Central African coast at the time to control the trade of African human beings. To build up her kingdom's military might, Nzinga offered shelter to runaway slaves and Portuguese-trained African soldiers. She stirred up rebellion among the people still left in Ndongo, by then ruled by the Portuguese. Nzinga also formed an alliance with the Dutch against the Portuguese. However, their combined forces were not enough to drive the Portuguese out. After retreating to Matamba again, Nzinga started to focus on developing the kingdom as a trading power and the gateway to the Central African interior. At the time of Nzinga's death in 1661 at the age of 81, Matamba had become a powerful kingdom that managed to resist Portuguese colonization attempts for an extended period of time. Her kingdom was only unified into Angola in the late 19th century. Nubingji Priestesses Mahamaza and Kayajiwa were feared leaders of the East African Nubingji Priestesses group that was influential in Rwanda and Uganda from 1850 to 1950. In 1911 Mahamaza proclaimed she would drive out the Europeans, of the Wazung would turn to water against her. She organized armed resistance against German colonialists and was eventually detained by the British in Kampala, Uganda, from 1913 to her death in 1945. She became the first in a line of rebel priestesses fighting colonial domination in the name of Nubingji, and even after being imprisoned she inspired a vast popular following. The British passed its 1912 Witchcraft Act in direct response to the political effectiveness of this spiritually based resistance movement. In August 1917, the Nzinga Kayajiwa followed in Mahamaza's footsteps and engineered the Nyakashini revolt, with unanimous public support. British officials placed a high price on her head, but no one would claim it. After the British attacked the Congo camp of Kayajiwa in January 1919, killing most of the men, Kayajiwa and the main body of fighters managed to evade the army and escape. However, the British captured the sacred white sheep and burned it to dust before a convocation of leading chiefs. After this deed, a series of disasters afflicted the district commissioner who killed the sheep. His herds were wiped out, his roof caved in, and a mysterious fire broke out in his house. Kayajiwa attempted another uprising, then went into the hills, where she was never captured.